Hi, I'm just a fat little Asian man. Ever watched movies like Kill Bill or John Wick before? Examples of action movies with inspiration from crime gangs in Asia. Widely romanticized for their aesthetics, their mysterious code of honor, and emotional struggles between family and brotherhood. All that stuff, however, was 40 years ago. Most of crime in Asia now looks like this. These shady looking warehouse apartment blocks are called compounds, centers for massive cyberscam operations that target the entire world. While it's easy to think that India is the center of cyberscams due to
Why did you redeem it?
the man that single-handedly destroyed India's entire image, the cyberscam empire is actually concentrated within these three countries: Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. How concentrated? Well, in 2023, cyberscam revenues were estimated to be around $43.8 billion, roughly 40% of the combined GDP in these three countries. But wait, there's more. The region is also the home to Asia's second biggest opium producer and biggest methamphetamine market, known as the Golden Triangle. The drug trade's revenue was estimated to be around $32 billion in 2019, worth roughly around 400 Walter Whites. But wait, there's even more. Multi-billion-dollar crime industries need two legs to run on. 1. Massive financial networks to systematically launder billions of dollars in revenue. And 2. Hundreds and thousands of people that will be forced into work at these compounds. Naturally, this means that the region is also home to the world's biggest human trafficking networks in the entire world, with multiple money laundering networks that hide in plain sight within companies worth billions of dollars. So, how did this happen? How do functioning governments allow transnational crime empires to operate practically freely within their territories? Well, it's a long process with decades of corruption, geopolitics, and prolonged instability that made the region into the perfect breeding grounds for crime groups. To really understand what's going on here, we need to talk about who is doing the crime. In most countries, the most powerful criminal organizations are locally produced, like Mexican cartels in Mexico or Japanese yakuza in Japan. So, one would naturally assume that, for example, crimes in Cambodia are done by Cambodian criminal organizations. Nope, the vast majority of massive industrial-scale crime and drug trade in Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos are orchestrated, controlled, or at the very least financed by Chinese transnational criminal organizations, aka TCOs, with local groups playing comparatively smaller roles. It's especially clear by looking at where the money flows. With the tens of billions of dollars coming from illegal drugs and cyber scams, the money laundering networks and systems within Cambodia and Laos are highly complex and sophisticated. Through a process called layering, money is laundered by quickly moving through networks of banks, fintech apps, and cryptocurrency, each acting as a layer that hides the money's trail. Then, the money is sent out through seemingly legitimate assets, like casinos or financial institutions. The process itself is extremely complicated, requiring massive digital infrastructure and resources, which, if you know anything about the Mekong region, it's just not really a place known for its advanced technology. That's because most of these extensive networks are Chinese-made or owned. Like the King's Romans Casino, a multi-billion-dollar money laundering front within Laos. The casino and its surrounding Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone is entirely run by Chinese businessman Zhao Wei, where he is allegedly involved in drug trade, human trafficking, and money laundering. Seemingly legitimate financial institutions like the Huiwang Group and the Prince Group, both Chinese-related multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, allegedly laundering billions of dollars annually through their own digital payments and cryptocurrency platforms. The Huiwang Group also operated an online marketplace through Telegram that sold stolen goods and provided illicit services like keeping slaves in check. Speaking of slaves, the Prince Group compound was recently raided for directing massive scam compounds using forced labor through human trafficking to scam globally. Now, you might be thinking, why doesn't the government just deal with these criminals? It's because the corruption here is on a completely different scale. It's not just politicians taking illegal bribes, the highest forms of government play an active role, allegedly, in the direction and operations of criminal organizations. Let's start off with Laos, where the government granted the crime boss Zhao Wei a 99-year-old land lease for the GTSEZ, effectively making him king of the area. Not even national police can enter the zone without special permission from Zhao Wei's security. Why'd they allow this? The Laos government owns a 20% stake of the SEZ, able to gain fees and taxes from Zhao Wei and other Chinese projects. Moving on to Cambodia, crime associations have made personal ties with the highest-ranking political families. On Huiwon Group's board of directors sits Hun To, the nephew of Hun Sen. The chairman of Prince Group Chen Zhi not only is an advisor to the Prime Minister Hun Manet, he was also business partners with Sar Soka, the Deputy Prime Minister. From Myanmar, there's no more allegedlys. Criminal organizations are inseparable from the military junta and its opposing ethnic armed organizations. Myanmar's already shaky economy basically became non-existent ever since the 2021 coup, where both sides of the ongoing civil war now have resorted to allying with TCOs as revenue sources. These criminal organizations run the drug trade and massive scam centers like KK Park, while the militia groups provide essential protection and security. There's a new word to describe this new type of state where major organized crime is allowed to flourish: scam states. A result forced by decades of weak political institutions and exploitation of mainland Southeast Asia's history of instability. The Mekong region is known for being extremely resource-rich, which meant that colonial powers only cared about sucking out as much resources as possible. Naturally, newly formed governments collapsed very quickly. Myanmar got stuck in several civil wars since the 1950s, Cambodia basically doing a hard reset on their civilization, and Laos getting pulled into major conflicts against its will. This meant that while other countries were busy reforming and cracking down on organized crime, institutions in the Mekong region stayed weak for decades, attracting all sorts of crime, especially Chinese organized crime. In 2012, Xi Jinping had just become the leader of the CCP, and we all know now that he was interested in staying that way for a very long time. He enacted an unprecedented anti-corruption crackdown on China, which just conveniently happened to purge its major political rivals and consolidate control over the CCP. During this purge, many Chinese TCOs involved in money laundering were struck hard, especially those with casinos in Macau. For those who survived, it was either jail time or moved down to Southeast Asia, which coincidentally was when governments were starting to release special economic zones, areas with less regulation and more freedom for foreign companies, perfect for those TCOs to set up shop. Chinese TCOs were also able to exploit the immense amount of Chinese infrastructure projects to copy and paste their criminal networks and disguise themselves as legitimate casino or hotel projects. This way, TCOs laundered millions into real estate and started to buy political protection from officials. Criminal groups would change once more when COVID hit and casinos were no longer able to launder money effectively. Empty casinos and hotels were then converted to compounds for cyberscam operations. These scams started off as illegal online gambling sites where victims would be able to win small amounts of money but locked out of their accounts as soon as large sums were deposited. These types of scams would later evolve into pig butchering scams, a very long process which boils down to 3 steps. The victim, aka the pig, is hooked through promises of high investment returns and or romantic relationships. Then begins the process of feeding, where scammers will spend a period of time building trust, asking the victim for smaller amounts of money as seemingly profitable investments. Because of this fake success, victims are encouraged to invest much larger sums, which starts the butchering process, where scammers will start pressuring to take out loans or drain personal savings to invest. Once the scammers see that they have the maximum possible amount, they will cut off all ties and disappear, leaving victims scarred emotionally and financially. Remember friends, there's no way just some random, attractive stranger contacts to just love you. That kind of romance is more forced than an average K-drama plot. Just don't respond, as these scammers have years of experience gaslighting and toying with people's insecurities to empty out your own bank account. They're not just AI chatbots. They tried using them and it was a laughingstock. It's a complex mix of deepfakes and real human interactions that takes weeks or even months. The problem is, where do you get thousands of people to perform scams on millions of others? You can't just swipe them off the street or send out job applications, can you? Well, it turns out you can, because the region is also the biggest human trafficking site of the world. Here's how that works. Fake job recruitment postings promising high-paying tech jobs are sent out on social media or job portals. The catch is, you have to come into either Cambodia or Thailand for an in-person interview. When you arrive on the site, it's already over. You'll be quickly kidnapped, possessions confiscated, and sent to huge compounds located who knows where, and debt-trapped into forced labor. Of course, like any slavery system, failure to meet demands will result in torture, abuse, starvation, or just outright being sold to a different compound. Isn't that just absolutely lovely? It's pretty obvious that the situation is really bad here, but as the international community takes notice and starts pressuring these countries to take down compounds and money laundering networks, it has to only get better from here, right? Wrong. This is international relations, no place for any optimism here. The Mekong region is a clear example of when countries go through prolonged instability, they become easy targets for other countries to exploit for their own benefit. The problems entrenched within Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos has been going on for decades, giving the Chinese government opportunities to dig its influence further into all of Southeast Asia. Initially, compounds were made up of mostly trafficked Chinese nationals, and the targeted victims were mostly Chinese as well. This basically gave the CCP the justification it needed to increase Chinese military and police presence through one-sided initiatives to dispatch and conduct police operations within these countries. China now had the tools they needed to selectively crack down on TCOs that let them increase leverage with local governments or by being lenient on CCP-friendly TCOs. Let's take a look at this guy, Wan Kwok Koi, or by his street name, Broken Tooth. Broken Tooth was a core member of the 14K Triad, the second biggest Chinese triad, until he rebranded himself as a patriotic businessman, re-establishing his criminal scam empire in Dongmei, Myanmar. To this date, China has not taken any action to crack down on Broken Tooth's operations, mostly because he builds museums that spread Chinese propaganda. There's also this guy, She Zhejiang, who launched a $15 billion city project that was connected to China's Belt and Road Initiative, but turned out to be one of the biggest scam compounds in Myanmar. When She launched his project, Chinese state media initially called him a model example, but when he was arrested by Thai police in 2022, they conveniently said he had nothing to do with the BRI. While these examples might not formally link the CCP to these criminals, you've got to admit it's a little bit suspicious. And it doesn't look like the situation is going to improve anytime soon. These are countries where the tourism industry is a decent chunk of their economy, especially because of all the exotic Buddhist sites. As you know, it's kind of hard to find your zen when it's also the home to one of the biggest crime centers of the world. As crimes, drugs, and kidnappings are more connected to these countries, some countries are already issuing travel warnings to their citizens, with most likely to follow along as well. As the tourism industry takes more and more hits, it will sadly be the vast majority of the people that will experience the toll on their economy. It doesn't help that countries are also thinking of pulling out from many infrastructure and aid projects. Their most likely alternative now is to look towards China for even more aid through the BRI, allowing China to seize more and more control over ASEAN nations. Yup, the same systems that criminal organizations abuse to hijack physical projects and financial networks in the first place. So while it might be easy to point fingers and call them breaking Burma, Cambodia, or money laundering, the vast majority of normal people will struggle to continue their lives, with all three countries being in the lower 25% of GDP per capita. Meanwhile, corrupt politicians will find other ways to source their corrupt cash and continue to rule with power. And yes, criminal organizations are already moving deeper into less populated areas within these countries. It's clear there needs to be a real change in order for things to look better for these countries. Sadly, today most of the problems are redirected toward neighboring countries and conflicts instead of peaceful resolutions. Thankfully, more and more Southeast Asian countries are moving in the direction of confronting corruption within their countries, and hopefully, this may bring the region all together. Thanks for watching, by the way. If you want to know more about the way Asian countries work, why don't you subscribe?